Hey everyone, good morning. Welcome, day 134, Spiritual Healthcare. It is good to see you guys. Today is going to be really interesting because I ended up getting two questions that really relate to each other, and I thought we could grab both of them. One on the Akashic Records and the other on physical mediumship or automatism. So this is gonna be really fun. So welcome everybody. Good morning. I hope you guys are doing really good. Good morning to Kaz. Hi, nice to see you. Nice to see you everyone. And Marge and Dan, nice to see you guys. I hope you guys. And morning Ed. Morning. Good morning to everyone. Daz, nice to see you. It's good to see you guys. It is crazy windy and blizzarding here in Edmonton right now. Like it's crazy windy and blizzarding, which reminds me of Dez's comment on Twitter last week about snow, mild snow and whatever. And apparently this is what karma looks like. We now have a blizzard, so I'm blaming you. So anyway, welcome everybody. Yeah, so today's gonna be really interesting because, as I say, I got two really cool questions. Say one on the Akashic Records and one on physical mediumship, because there's been a lot of talk lately about the brand new documentary that's out on Netflix called Surviving Death. And it's really cool. It's really amazing. I think we've got we've had a lot of questions about it. I think this is one of the first documentaries that's come out that has really provided some, I think, updated knowledge and information on where we are in terms of research and all sorts of things like that. So it's really cool. And I'm glad you guys are watching it. I'm glad you guys are enjoying it because I think it's really a great thing to have out there on a popular platform, which sometimes this stuff gets lost a little bit into the obscurity of the internet, or oh, it's just crazy talk or whatever. So it's really good that this is coming out and whatnot. And both questions, as I say, both the Akashic Records and the mediumship question, I think both tie into this. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. Good morning to John and Sally. Nice to see you. Good morning, guys. It is really good to see you. I hope you guys had a really good week. Of course, last week was kind of insane with some of the events going on in the world and whatnot. I hope you guys were able to keep your center, keep your balance. It's been a test to that, I think, for a lot of people. And use the tools that you know from spiritual healthcare, from your own readings to keep your center, keep your balance, and keep the faith. It's funny because typically when we learn new tools and stuff like that, there's always something that like crops up that's like, do you really know it? Do you really know it though? Let's see if you know it. It's like, it seems to be the way it is. It seems to be the way it is. So it's really good. So I wanted to start off today. I should mention this as well before I get going. So finally, my fire art and whatnot has its own YouTube channel for Snake and Pyre, which is my all of my fire arts and stuff like that with and the music's done by my partner Michael, and it finally has its own YouTube channel. So if you guys are interested, I will post it to the Entity Seeker Facebook page, because I know I get a lot of questions, especially on Twitter, about my fire eating and all of that stuff. So I will post a new YouTube channel and whatnot, and if you guys want to subscribe, you can. So kind of unrelated to this, but I thought I'd bring it up because I'm happy that I finally got a channel for this stuff. So to get into today, I thought I would start with the question about the Akashic Records. Okay, so the question actually came from Cha Ling, and he was asking, is the Akashic Records basically YouTube for the afterlife? And I thought this was like, what a great way to put it. So for those of you guys who don't know the philosophy, I guess, behind the Akashic Records, it's basically like a compendium of every single thought and idea that has ever been thought, that has ever been put out there. And the idea behind it and the philosophy behind it is that all like universal events, emotions and words, any intentions, like anything that has ever been energetically created is stored in what they call the Akashic Records. So it goes through a lot of different cultures. I think this is just one interpretation of what it is. And it doesn't matter whether it's like future, past, present, because time is the now. Everything's in the now. And it not only involves people, but it involves things that aren't people as well. So entities and animals and all sorts of stuff like that. So it's said that what they are is that they're basically encoded in this kind of non-physical plane of existence. And it believes that basically all of these different things, and this kind of goes back to things we've actually talked about in spiritual healthcare, everything resonates on its own frequency, and it generates its own vibration, and therefore it is stored within this great big, like almost hall of records, to use kind of a person term. So there's, as I say, there's multiple translations of this idea, right? And the Sanskrit term Akasha was actually introduced through a fellow who characterized it as almost like the Force, right? For those of you guys who are Star Wars fans, it's like it's the Force. It's like, you know, they described it as, you know, information that's scrolled on these tablets of light. There's lots of visuals that artists and writers and philosophers have come up with to describe it as something like nirvana, I guess, would be kind of another word for it. The idea that nothing ever comes out of nothing. There's always something, there's always some sort of material thing there. So even in early Buddhism, this was a philosophy and a concept. And it was basically they had the potential capacity, people had the potential capacity to read these records if they found what the Buddhists entitled enlightenment. So it was part of the process of enlightenment. You get there, you get access to the records. There was a lady by the name of Alice Bailey, who wrote a book called Light of the Soul. And she ended up writing a really interesting paragraph on it that I thought was cool. So I'll read this to you guys quickly. She said, "The Akashic Record is like an immense photographic film, registering all the desires and earth experiences of our planet. Those who perceive it will see pictured thereon the life experiences of every human being since time began, the reactions to experience of the entire animal kingdom, the aggregation of the thought forms of a karmic nature of every human unit throughout time. Here lies the great deception of the records. Only a trained occultist can distinguish between the actual experience and those astral pictures created by the imagination and keen desire." So, interesting, right? So, Dan's asking how it's spelled. So it's spelled Akashic. Okay. So as an interesting concept, stuff that we've kind of talked about. So it's a little bit grander than the idea of kind of YouTube for the afterlife that Chaling was talking about. But I love that analogy. It's really good. And it is said to be kind of a rabbit hole. So how does this relate to mediumship and physical mediumship and all of this kind of thing in our next question? And I thought this was such an awesome question that again came in from Twitter. And the question was, do you believe in trance and physical mediumship? It seemed sort of far-fetched to me. The physical, I would have to live to believe it. So I thought this was a really, really good question, because I think the reason why things like mediumship get so, I think, thrown under the bus is kind of our own fault, because there's so much. It's one of the few instances in science that where people are deliberately faking instances of this happening. So things like cryptids end up actually falling into this same trap, right? So you can, like, say for example, you think of something like Sasquatch or anything that there is substantial evidence to support. But you've got both sides of the coin. You've got people that are trying to disprove it, and then you've got people that are trying to prove it by faking evidence, right? So mediumship kind of falls into this category as well, because you've got people who are deliberately trying to fake it, or they're trying to scam people and make money. And then on the other side of the coin, you've got the people that are trying to debunk it. And in the middle, you've got the people that are actually, quite capable of some pretty cool stuff. So this is a really, really tricky category. But so the reason why the Akashic Records, I think, plays into this, or the idea that every thought that's ever been thought is in existence still, regardless of what you call it, Akashic Records, or however you view it. There's in quantum theory, there's an idea that all of this information is actually like a smear around in almost like a black hole, and we're kind of in the center of it. And the smear of information is accessible through our focus, our alignment, all of that kind of thing. In spiritual healthcare, we've talked about it, where the more in alignment you are, the more access you have to new information or new ideas or inspiration or all of those things. So no matter where you fall into that system of thinking, it all still kind of ties back in and applies. So the idea of physical mediumship, and I'll define this for you guys so you know what it is the idea that you can meditate yourself into such a state of alignment, and sometimes it's maybe misalignment, right? That you end up almost being possessed or taken over by a different energy, a different consciousness. So your consciousness is kind of either like put at rest, or sort of it moves over, I guess, for something else, or to receive information, receive blocks of thought of information. So there's a couple of different ideas as to what this might be, what the real thing might be. We're not going to talk about like the frauds necessarily today, because that's kind of a whole nother topic. But the actual idea of like physical mediumship is allowing that energy, whether it be like an entity or whether it be source or whatever it is, to move you in a way that is communication. So some people report things like automatic writing, where they pick up a pen and a piece of paper, and they just go into sort of a trance, and they start writing, and they end up getting messages that way. All sorts of stuff. Some people have reported shaking, tremors, moving in ways that they're not controlling, all sorts of things like that. So where this ends up getting, of course, very convoluted, is the idea that people are experiencing either something due to the sympathetic nervous system, and they're creating it themselves, right? Like they believe it so much that they're creating it themselves, or they're actually suffering with some sort of like neurological disorder. So whether it be epilepsy or schizophrenia, or something going on where they are actually like they're having a physical response to a neurological problem. So there was a Spanish physician by the name of Victor Melcior, I think Melcior, who believed that physical phenomenon was caused by basically the projection of a nervous force from the medulla oblongata, which is the functioning of the autonomous nervous system. And so that like regulates your digestion and your breathing and heart rate and all that stuff. And it was associated with nervous disturbances. And what he believed was it was actually the lessening of intellectual functions, which led to this physical movement and physical mediumship. And it couldn't ever be produced by healthy people. That was his belief. It must be somebody with psychological problems and physical ailments, and they had disease and all of this kind of thing. So we now know that that's just completely untrue, right? It's completely untrue. And institutes that are, and research organizations that are studying this, I mean, we're talking about Yale. They've got a near-death program that's really interesting called COPE. Of course, Princeton is studying this now, which is the Paralab. You've got all these people, Windbridge Institute, which I'll talk about very often. They've studied Mark Boccozzi, who's the president of that association, has done years of research into physical mediumship as well. There's definitely something massively to it, and the emergence of spiritualism, I think, in the mid-19th century was kind of it was accompanied by attempts to kind of naturalize the supernatural through medical argument. Okay, so there was a lot of people kind of people would come out with these experiences and say, you know what, like I was able to channel information that I didn't have before, that I could not have known, or channeled information for someone else. I had a message from someone else that I could not have known, and it happened. And things like that, and of course with it usually comes physical movement of objects like table tilting, and all sorts of stuff like that, which again can be faked. So we've got sort of this catch-22. So it's a really sort of a convoluted subject, but people really started being deemed nuts when people began to be a little bit more vocal about it. They started to think, okay, all these people are crazy, what is going on? They must have mental illness, and bam, they would get thrown, into an asylum or some sort of mental facility to be fixed. When in fact, what was happening was often a very blissful and joyful experience that they were having, with energy, with spirit, with whatever you want to call it. But something really positive was actually happening for them. Their lives were not decreasing or, losing quality because they were having these experiences. It wasn't always negative. We tend to think of physical mediumship as something that's more to the negative, because we think of things like possession. We think of somebody like Annalise Michel from The Exorcism of Emily Rose, who there was a huge court battle, in that movie about whether or not the person was, dying of epilepsy or died of a neurological problem and was neglected, or whether she's taken by this negative entity. So recently, like within the last number of years, the DSM, the medical community, has they've begun to shift their opinion because they've had to. With the new research out there. So with the new DSM-5, which is the Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Medicine, which is basically the great big book where all the doctors go to look up disorders, all the recognized disorders. There is now a disorder in there called possession trance disorder, which was actually put in there by Dr. Etzel Cardenia, who I had the pleasure of hearing lecture just this past year. And brilliant guy, and is one of the people responsible for editing the DSM every year. So there's different editions, that come out. And possession trance disorder actually did find its way into the DSM. So here's the interesting thing about this. You can only be diagnosed with possession trance disorder if what you are channeling is wrecking your life and ruining your experience. So here's the clincher. If you are channeling information that is uplifting, that's positive, that is enhancing your experience, that you're having fun with, doesn't classify as that. You have to be channeling something that's negative, that's upsetting, that is comes off as maybe aggressive or negative or something like that. And unless that's there, they don't label you with possession trance disorder. It's really interesting. So they're starting to really begin to recognize, I think, the benefits of the ability to calm our brains down and receive this information. So I've experimented and worked with this type of thing for a really, really long time, and I absolutely love it. I find one of the best ways to get into that non-resistant state, and it's really quite the process, is something called Hemisink Meditation. So the Monroe Institute, which is run by Robert Monroe, he worked with the CIA for quite a long time, and the idea of people being able to calm their brains down, to channel new information. He worked with the military. Really fascinating work. If you guys look up the Monroe Institute, super fascinating. So he developed this idea of Hemisink meditation, which is essentially the idea of getting the two hemispheres of your brain to kind of link up and start to jive in a way that you start to receive brand new information, and can tune into what we've been talking about, the idea of, whether you call it the Akashic Records, whether you call it source energy, whether you call it the universe, that smear on the outside of the wormhole, whatever, whatever you want to call it, is really the idea behind it. And the people that have done Hemisink meditation have reported out-of-body experiences. They've reported the physical mediumship, like being moved. I've had that happen when I was playing around with it. The feeling of like my hands being picked up and moved very carefully. So all sorts of really, really neat things. There's some fantastic information from a lot of physical mediums and mental mediums. A lot of the captions and the books that we've been reading from over the last 134 days of spiritual healthcare have come from physical and mental mediums. So Esther Hicks, Abraham Hicks, Jane Roberts, with Seth, all of those, even my great-great-grandfather's friend, Louis Benjamin, with the humble ones of the 20th plane. All of this would be classified as like physical and mental mediumship. So what I find, and I know people that are able to do this as well, what I find the key is to identifying sort of the frauds from the real thing is the quality of the message that's coming through, because ultimately that's really what matters. Whether you believe it or whether you don't believe it, it doesn't matter at the end of the day. What matters is the quality of message and how it makes you feel. And what I've found the clincher is, and I think both Julie and Mark at the Windbridge would agree with this, is that when people are truly doing channeling with something like source energy, with this higher plane, whatever you want to call it, what I've found is that they bring forward a message that is empowering. There's no warnings. It's about what you can do, not what you can't do. You know it in your being when you hear the truth. I really believe that it kind of fits in your ear really well. And what I found with them is that the messages are always about empowerment. They're about joy. They're about how you can get from where you are to where you want to be. There's no criticism. There's, it's uplifting. It's positive. And when you're getting stuff like that, you're kind of in the vibrational frequency you want to be. And as I say, this is why I think these two questions link together really well. And I think the people who end up sort of channeling these terrifying visions and these warnings and all this kind of thing, they're really in the wrong frequency. You don't want to be into that arena of picking up thoughts like that, because here we are talking about the idea that every thought that's ever been thought is out there, right? So based on that theory, we can channel any sort of thought that we want, really. We really, if that's the theory, if we're running with that, then we can channel whatever it is that we want. So we want to make sure that when we're going into these, meditative states and things like that, that we're letting go. We're not trying to force anything, and we're getting ourselves to the best vibration we can so that we pick up on the stuff that we really, really, really want. So do I think that like physical mediumship and mental mediumship is a thing? Yeah, I do. Absolutely. I've experienced it myself. And the information and the connection and the relationship that you can build with source, I think is invaluable. And the fact that, the more we can let go, the more we get access to inspiration and information. My partner said to me before, he said that genius really, he's like, that's what genius is. It's the ability to receive. And I thought that was so brilliant, because really that is what it is. It's the inspiration, those ideas, having access to that is really that. It's the ability to be quiet and receive and listen. And all of a sudden, stuff pops up that seems like it's out of the blue, but really nothing's out of the blue at the end of the day. Nothing is really out of the blue. So, is there a fraudulent realm to the mediumship world? Yeah, of course. Of course. That's why the Society of Psychical Research was actually developed. Absolutely. They were looking to debunk the people who were trying to scam other people. The idea that, of course, we go back to Victorian seances. We go back to, any of, or at least not all of them, but some of them, was a time period where people were really putting on a show. It was just the way it was. It was just the way it was. It doesn't mean that everything that went on back then was fake either. Probably one of the best cases of a seance going really, really right was in the 1970s during something called the Philip experiment. And that took place in Ontario, here in Canada, between the Society of Psychical Research and Mensa. So what happened was that they wanted to recreate or try to either prove or disprove the idea of seances. They wanted to know, like, what is the deal? Was this fake? Is this possible? And they asked a question on top of that, which was, can we manifest an intelligence based on our own focus? So this was a huge question. Can we manifest not just physical movements? We're not just talking about like poltergeist activity that we're generating from our own minds. We're talking about creating a consciousness that is generated because we are focusing on, somebody that we're gonna just create out of the blue, not a spirit, somebody we're gonna create. And what they did was they basically sat down, took a pen and paper, and started writing down who they wanted this person to be. And they named him Philip. And Philip was royalty who had a long backstory. They created a great character who was kind of a sleazeball. He ended up in this crazy affair, and she ended up dying or being killed or something like that. But it was this crazy convoluted backstory that seemed very real. And this guy's life was kind of a mess. And they ended up, they called him Philip. So every day for about a year to 2 years, they would meet and they would sit down and they would start recreating a seance. Okay, they'd start recreating a seance. So they would sit around the table and do everything that you would imagine would happen in a Victorian seance. And they struggled and struggled and struggled. They couldn't get it to work. They were like, you know what? Maybe we're crazy, right? Because we're not actually talking to a physical person. Maybe that's kind of nuts. And something really interesting happened. So one of them had this great aha moment, and they realized, wait a minute, I think we know what we're missing. When they looked back on all of the Victorian seances, what they realized was that everybody there was having fun. Everyone. They were all having fun. And they were joking, they were laughing, they weren't coming in being all stoic and serious. They were having food, they were having drinks, they were having a blast, and stuff started to happen. So when they realized this, they realized that they had been missing this huge factor. They came back and sat down again and redid it. Within 48 hours, they had a physical response from Philip. And they interacted with Philip for a really long time. And Philip was it wasn't just a matter of things moving about by themselves, things were responding to questions. So they would, ask a question, and the person who would ask would require knocks back in an answer, but the knocks would happen right in front of them on the table. Or they would happen from under the table, or they would, they're really strange things. They were seeing chairs stack up by themselves. They were seeing furniture move across the room. They were seeing just an explosion of activity that was going on. But what they needed to add was the fun. They missed the fun. And as soon as they added that, they got their response. So to recreate this experiment, because they wanted to know if it would happen twice, they got another group together, same SPR and Mensa people, and they created a character by the name of Lilith. And Lilith was sort of this badass spy, and they created this whole story around this sort of James Bond character. and they put her through the same paces where they sat down and thought, okay, we're gonna try to talk to this non-existent Lilith, and lo and behold, as soon as they added the fun and the joy, bam, all of a sudden, right, they suddenly have this activity that's going around. So it was pretty cool. So is there a correlation between this mediumship and the Akashic Records and our joy and all of this? Yeah, I think there is. If you kind of take the labels off of it, I think I'm of the firm belief that we all have the ability to be mediums. I think we're born for that. I think we're able to connect with that energy. I think we're supposed to connect with that energy. Even though there are a lot of religious practices and stuff that will tell you that, that's evil and that's terrible and you don't do that. But no, I think we're supposed to connect with this stuff. We're supposed to have a connection to non-physical. And what I found throughout my work with it is that they are so excited and so receptive to that communication. Like, they are super excited when they find someone who is able to hear, who's able to receive. My partner and I, we talk about it all the time because he composes music, and many of the great composers, and you could call this actually a physical mediumship. And many of the great composers over the years, like Beethoven and Bach and all these people, described the same thing. Mozart described the same thing, where they were able to get themselves into almost like a trance, and they were receiving the notes, they were receiving the art, they were receiving the information and writing it down. My partner's always the first one to say, don't ever give me credit, because he's like, it's not me, it's source. So I think, and any artist that's experienced this, I know some of you guys are out there that do amazing things. I know Shadow, who's here often, like her and Brandy are very much into music. Whether it be any of the arts or dealing with animals or nature or anything like that. I think a lot of people can refer to that. Athletes call it the zone, right? They call it the zone. They get into that. If any of you guys have seen the movie Soul by Disney, oh my God, okay, watch it. If you have not seen it, watch it. It is all about what we're talking about today, okay? So if you have not seen Disney's Soul, go do it. It's brilliant. It's brilliant. And it's all about what we're talking about. And it's about non-physical, and the idea that, our passions are our connection, and passion and joy is connection with source. And that's how you access that realm, and access that information and access those energies. It's so good. It's so good. It's so good. If your kids haven't seen it, be ready to explain it to your kids, because they're going to be really confused. But it's insane. It's so good. So I think when we remember that we can channel this, we can channel this information, we can be the receptors of this information. Our brain is a translation device. And of course it goes back to the hard problem, as David Chalmers would call it, the hard problem, which is consciousness emergent or fundamental? And when we realize that it's more likely to be fundamental, that it is in our environment, that is something that is translated by our brains, rather than generated by the brain necessarily, then we have access to a whole other realm of information. And physical mediumship is just another avenue for that. That's all it is. And we have to just be aware that there's the fakes, there's the frauds, there's, that's going to be out there, but the quality of the message, that's what you're paying attention to. It's the quality. And ultimately, that's all that matters. So speaking of physical mediumship and non-physical mediumship and all those things, I thought we'd read a bit of it today in with Ask and It Is Given, and that's by Esther and Jerry Hicks, where it's channeled by Esther Hicks, I should say, channeled by Esther Hicks. And I thought this was relevant. This little piece was relevant for not only today's discussion, but for what's going on in the world right now. So check this out. All those statistics, that are gathered about your own experiences and about others are only about how somebody has already flowed energy. They are not about any hard and fast now reality. Within your current society, there are many who gather the statistics of the human experience. They spend lifetimes comparing experiences and categorizing them as appropriate or inappropriate, right or wrong. They weigh the pros and the cons and the pluses and the minuses of topic after topic, but they seldom realize that their vibrational offerings are not serving them. They have no sense of their own power because they are flowing their energy into opposing directions. Their lives have become more about labeling the behavior or experiences of those with whom they share their planet than about their own creating, and find themselves in a very uncomfortable position as they come to believe that their happiness or well-being depends on the behavior of others. They point to people, behaviors, or beliefs and call them inappropriate, saying no to them, without realizing that they are including into their experience the vibration of the very thing they do not want. And so, without the knowledge of how it is that those unwanted things are making their way into their experience, they become increasingly guarded and fearful. So it's a little bit of an insight, as I say, into what's happening in the world right now, and what we've been talking about today. So we, as I say, we get to choose. We get to choose. Marge is saying she's getting her cards read. It was a Christmas gift from her daughter's boyfriend. That's cool. That's kind of fun. Those are always interesting. My Stephanie, when she was still alive, she and I, as I say, we did a lot of work with tarot and experiences and stuff like that. It was really interesting. And what we found was that the cards depended on the vibration with which you went into the card reading, which was really interesting. And cartomancy works the same way. So if you go in with a negative vibration, you're going to get a negative reading. If you go in with a positive vibration, you get all the positive cards. You know, whether they're true or not true or whatever, it doesn't really matter. But it's an interesting experiment in vibration when you get into it. So check it out, try it out. It's really cool. Get yourself into a really good place and see what you get, because you'll find that there's a difference, and it's all dependent on your energy going in. It's really cool. It's really, really cool. So we can't go anywhere without some affirmations today. So everybody, take a breath. I'm a channel of peace and well-being, and my need for peace is abundantly met. I unconditionally accept, love, and appreciate myself and who I am. I recognize and am grateful for the abundance that is constantly flowing in my life, which I can choose to allow or not. I feel with every breath a sense of peace and love. I help others by maintaining and tending to my connection with Source as much as possible. This well-being is accessible to me, even in a sea of uncertainty. And at this moment, all is well. I am able to liberate myself from my past and live with peace and serenity. I can see and appreciate all the beauty and abundance of the life around me. I am able to embrace love while letting go of fear. And I find peace with the soothing silence of my inner being. And everybody take a breath. Thank you guys for another amazing Wednesday of spiritual healthcare. I love our Wednesdays. They're so good. They're so good. And I hope that was an interesting conversation. It's always interesting. It's a really different concept, the Akashic Records. Check out Surviving Death on Netflix. It's really interesting, and it's pretty cool. And if you want to delve into this sort of idea of the Akashic Records, it's pretty neat. It's pretty neat, and as I say, it goes back throughout history. It's got a billion different names, and it's really cool. And so yeah, it's worth checking out. It's a cool concept. If you guys are interested in more of my fire stuff, as I say, I'll post the link to my new YouTube channel on Entity Seeker, and you guys can check it out. I know some of you guys already have. Thank you so much for supporting that, and it means the world. It means the world to us. We've not put it out there as much as probably we should have before. We've been I guess we've been creating for each other. We've been creating for each other rather than creating for like public people. So this is the first time we've put it out there. So thank you guys so much, and I will see you guys next Wednesday. Subscribe, of course, to Entity Seeker on YouTube, and youtube.com/Entity Seeker. All the classes are there. EntitySeeker.ca, of course, is the official site. You guys can get all the classes there too, and all my interviews and all of that. There's going to be some brand new interviews coming out this month. And they're really, really cool, including a discussion with a local filmmaker here, Brandon Reines, and it was a really, really great talk. So I will post that as soon as I get it, and I will see you guys next Wednesday. Spiritual Healthcare. Bye, guys.